Chat, what's happening? We got Cornhusker Corner in here. We got Chase in here. Joe, what's up, guys? This is a special show for me because I've got a friend who's coming on to help me do this show because I cannot do it alone today. Just going to keep it real. So my friend Jake, trying to think of the best way to describe him. He's an IU super fan, but there's more to it than that because he actually called games while he was at IU. He had his own radio show while he was at IU, and he loves IU the way that I love Nebraska. And because of that, I've been planning this show with him for the last couple of months because we were so excited for this one weekend. This is one of my friends who's actually a diehard Big Ten fan, and I don't have many of those since most of my friends went to USC or Pac-12 schools. Anyway, Jake has a lot of great insight about what's going on with IU because I don't know what actually is happening with their program when they're 3-1, but they're still an underdog to Nebraska this weekend. And Jake's going to bring that to light for us. So with all that said, he wrote a great show for us to go through today, and I'm really excited to bring him on and introduce you guys. So this is my friend Jake. Jake is out in Chicago. Jake, welcome to the show. And, 5.5 point underdog as of right now. Just right off top, are you saying that's a fair prediction to give Nebraska 5 points, or do you think that's a little bit of, what's the right word for it? Vegas not understanding what's actually going on with the Nebraska football program?
Well, first of all, Connor, thank you for having me on. I'm a huge Crazed fan, longtime subscriber. I remember one day back when we were out in LA playing pickup football when you talked to me about the Crazed concept itself. So awesome to see what you've done with the channel, seeing it come to life from that talk in the football field. And you know what? I am completely shocked that Nebraska is a favorite against anyone in the Big Ten, regardless of how Indiana's looked this year. So I think those 5.5 points is very surprising to me as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure how Vegas sets that line because when you're looking at what Nebraska's done so far this season, is there any way you can say you believe in them to be able to handle another Big Ten team? They really struggled against Georgia Southern. They got rocked by OU. And even though IU's had their fair share of difficulties, there's no justification. And I guess today we're going to get through all that. We're going to try and figure out and understand why Vegas believes in Nebraska. To be honest, I'm just going to keep it real before we even start the show. I do believe Nebraska has a really good shot in this game this weekend. I think they'll probably win just based on getting that bye week. They're going to have a few adjustments, and I just don't have much faith in IU. I wrote them last week against Cincinnati, and I got smacked hard for that one. So anyway, today, Jake, before we continue on with our show, I want to let you guys know we're going to take a couple calls. So if you do want to get in on the show, ask your questions, make your comments, all you've got to do is be in the Discord. The link is in the description below. When you're in the Discord, you can join the waiting room. And once you're in the waiting room, I'll drag you in once we're ready to bring live callers on. So we're going to get right into it. Jake, I want to start off with some of the injuries that are going on for Nebraska. And I wanted to get your take on any of the injuries that you saw at IU. Not sure if they're going to be missing any guys. Nebraska obviously has their number 2 running back, A.J. Allen. He broke his collarbone. I think he's had surgery on it. He's done for the year. Obviously, Teddy Prohaska's out. And then you've got Kevin Williams Jr. out as well. And he was one of the guards, tackles. He could play both positions. So Nebraska's really struggling on offense with some of these injuries. Fortunately, they're going to have Travis Vokalek back. But what's going on with IU?
IU has remained relatively healthy throughout this entire season. Last year, IU was 2-10, mostly due in part to the fact that we were devastated by injuries. IU last year was preseason ranked. We had such a successful year the year before, everybody coming back. Seemed like everything was set up amazingly. Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback. And the entire season just fell apart due to injuries. So far this season, Indiana has remained injury-free, and pretty much everybody who is expected to contribute has been contributing so far.
What's interesting about IU from 2020 to 2021, there were such high hopes going into last year for IU. One of the big spots, and I had just talked about him in my video this week, Kalen DeBoer was the offensive coordinator back then. Because of that, he was able to help propel Indiana to, it was a miraculous record that year, right? What was it? They were 6-1 and they almost won their bowl game against Tennessee.
Well, so we had Kalen DeBoer in 2019 when we went 8-4. We're number 2 in the Big Ten in overall offense. Just a really incredible season. And then he left to go be the head coach at Fresno State. In that 2020 season. But it was still a lot of his play calling, a lot of his players. Our offensive coordinator was one of his assistants. So it was a very similar scheme that took over.
2019 was the year Nebraska lost at home. They were wearing the black jerseys. Luke McCaffrey and Noah Vedra were playing quarterback. Adrian was out that day, I believe. And IU just found a way to win. They won by 7, forced a lot of turnovers. Nebraska could not get anything going on that day in offense, it didn't feel like.
Yeah,
Really,
and
the
IU in that
defense
game
was good that year.
IU in that game, that was our second game after losing Phoenix for the season, and we had Peyton Ramsey come in as the backup quarterback, and he played really, really well against Nebraska, threw for 350 passing yards. You know, Kalen DeBoer in that season had Michael Penix and Peyton Ramsey, and Peyton Ramsey led Northwestern the next season to the Big Ten championship game. So Kalen DeBoer has developed 2 successful Big Ten quarterbacks. Obviously, Michael Penix this season is having an incredible year at Washington, Heisman candidate, potential playoff team if they can beat USC and maybe Utah. So I think that Kalen DeBoer, I know we're going to talk about coaching later, but I think that DeBoer would be a very strong candidate for the Nebraska job.
Yeah, DeBoer has been really hot right now, especially at Washington, who was struggling. I think they were 4-8 last year, and now they just came off that Michigan State win. They beat Stanford handily, and that's a rivalry game. So DeBoer is on fire, and Michael Penix Jr. is awesome, but no longer at Indiana, so it doesn't matter. They've got a new quarterback, Connor Bazelak. I'm not sure if anybody ever took him as a serious transfer product that could come to Nebraska, but people had talked about him being a potential. So what was your take when he did come to IU, and what do you think IU's take is now that they've got him there? What's the production looked like compared to what you thought it was going to be?
Well, I was absolutely thrilled when he came to IU. You know, last season, once Penix got hurt, the quarterback play was just absolutely detrimental to the team. Jack Tuttle took over. He's a transfer from Utah, former 4-star recruit, decent player. In the previous season, back in the 2020 season, when we went 6-1, Penix got hurt. Tuttle had to take over, but the team was a lot better. The defense was a lot better, a lot healthier. You know, Tuttle led Indiana to a win over Wisconsin, but last year he was absolutely terrible. He got hurt. We then put in 4-star quarterback, true freshman recruit, Donovan McCulley, who was so bad at passing the ball, I nicknamed him the single threat because he could only run. He eventually got benched or injured. I believe benched because he was so bad. And they brought in backup walk-on Grant Grimmel, who was then so bad again that we had to bring McCulley back in. So the quarterback situation going into the year was just absolutely brutal. McCulley was supposed to be the future, our highest-rated quarterback recruit ever, one of the only 4-star quarterbacks we've ever gotten. And he was so bad, he's now converted to a wide receiver. So we brought in Bazelak, and I was extremely excited to get him. SEC starter, has a lot of experience against good teams. And he's come in, and I think he's been pretty solid so far. The big issue, of course, is his accuracy. Bazelak is a gunslinger. He's got a cannon for an arm, and he has the potential to make virtually every single throw. Deep throws, firing bullets in like he's Brett Favre. But there just seems to be a lot of times when he has an open guy and he just sails the ball way too high. I count 3 to 5 sailed passes a game. And as a fan, it's really frustrating because these are usually open passes that he's missing.
Do those lead to turnovers, or are they just bad balls?
There have been a couple times that have led to turnovers, but so far we've been relatively unscathed. Cincinnati was able to pick him off last week on a sailed ball, and I believe Western Kentucky got one 2 weeks ago. But most of them have been relatively innocuous, which I know is not going to be the case when we get into Big Ten play.
So right now, Bazelak, I just pulled up the stats so we can all get on the same page. He's 53% completion on the year. He threw 3 passes last week, I think. Something crazy.
He leads the nation in pass attempts this season.
So this is a
no
true
qualifiers.
gunslinger.
He's number 1.
Yeah, this is a true gunslinger. IU will come out and throw against Nebraska. That's why the over set to 61, 59. What's that now?
Yeah, 61.
So we're expecting a game where IU has to come out and throw. Nebraska's probably going to try to slow it down. If I had to guess, Nebraska's offense is going to come out. They're going to try and work Anthony Grant because that's what's been working. The offensive line has not been able to protect Casey. And what's the defensive line situation at IU? I mean, does IU have the defense? Not that OU does, but do they have a serviceable defense that can get pressure? Is their defense the weaker side of the ball? What's it looking like there? Because my understanding right now is Nebraska and IU both are struggling hard on D.
Well, Indiana head coach Tom Allen is a defensive guy. He was IU's defensive coordinator when he got promoted to be head coach. And every single time the Indiana's had a decent season under him, it's because of the defense. Not every time. Kalen DeBoer obviously had an incredible offense, but that was kind of the exception. Indiana's defense has always been incredibly strong. Tom Allen is a true player's coach. Everyone on the defense loves playing for him. He always gets super hyped, super into the game, always hugging players. He came up with IU's team motto, Leo, love each other. And that's a motto that everyone on the team is emblematic of and everyone really buys into. So our defense this year has been pretty solid, in my opinion. It's led by Cam Jones at middle linebacker, who's just an absolute beast. He's 6'3", 230 pounds, getting 10, 15 tackles a game. He is everywhere on the field. And if Casey Thompson is going to be able to control this game, then he needs to know where number 4 is on every single play.
Fair enough. Do you think that IU's defense has the secondary to shut down Casey and Nebraska's potentially threatening passing attack? Because you got 3 receivers at Nebraska who have shown flashes of being pretty good. So if they get some, good looks and Casey gets off to a hot start, is IU in danger in that backfield, or do they have defenders to help out?
Indiana going into the season, I would have said the secondary is one of our strengths. Tywan Mullen pretty shockingly returned for his senior season. He was, in a sophomore season, he was named first-team All-American, the first ever first-team All-American in Indiana history. We have 2 other seniors in that defensive backfield. And they looked pretty decent against Illinois and against Idaho. But in the last 2 weeks against Western Kentucky and Cincinnati, they've been kind of exposed on these deep passes. Western Kentucky, a little bit different than Cincinnati because Western Kentucky was just destroying us with their scheme. It just seemed like every single play, they were getting someone open. Tyson Helton, I was very impressed by his coaching skills. I think that Nebraska, if they hire a defensive coach, maybe could look to him as the new offensive coordinator. If he can get a pay raise, even though a demotion technically in job position, would be an interesting fit. He's the younger brother of Clay Helton, who was the Georgia Southern coach. And Cincinnati, in the first half, it just seemed every single time they threw a deep ball, it was connecting. So I would say the secondary definitely needs a lot to work on. Tywan Mullen obviously has the potential to shut down Trey Palmer or whoever he's guarding. But I would say that the Nebraska pass offense is probably going to look to do a lot of damage on deep passes.
We say shut down Trey Palmer. I saw this post the other day on Twitter. It says Trey Palmer has 28 receptions through the first 4 games, and that's the most receptions by a Nebraska receiver in history through 4 games. So pretty impressive stat.
Very impressive, yes.
I don't know if they can shut him down per se, but I think they can limit him. I think the key is obviously if they have pressure, it's going to make it hard for Casey to throw. One thing that we saw in that OU game, and I'm not sure what Chat thinks about this, we had Chubba Purdy come in, and he was able to make plays with his legs and keep things going when the offensive line wasn't there to have his back. Casey, I don't know what it was that day. He would drop back and he would take a sack, no throwing the ball away. Didn't want to throw an interception, obviously, but we would end up in these 3rd and extremely long situations or 2nd and long because he would take sacks, whereas Chubba would run around and try and escape it. If we got to a point, I would not mind, this is just a personal take, I would not mind seeing Chubba come in to mix things up. If Casey was resistant to running it, and not even running it, scrambling a little bit more and trying to find a lane, because that is one thing he did in the Northwestern game, the very first game of the year, where he had a few plays that looked like they were dead, but he found a way to make them come back to life. So something we'll be looking forward to in this game for sure, to see how the quarterback gets around and tries to keep plays alive, because that killed them in that OU game. So we talked about the quarterback. Let's talk about the running backs. What is the running game for IU? And are they more pass or run? If you had to pick, would you rather them pass or run against Nebraska? Because right now they're more pass because they've been playing from behind, right? But in reality, what's the stronger
so
of the 2 units?
Indiana has been trailing at halftime all 4 weeks, and we're 3-1. So we've been playing a lot of come from behind offense, a lot of passing the ball. The Indiana runs an extremely high tempo, fast-paced offense, like a Chip Kelly type. Obviously, as Indiana has run the most passing attempts of any, or Bazelak has the most passing attempts of any quarterback in the country. Indiana ran 103 plays last week against Cincinnati. And I think Indiana wants to run the ball more than we currently are. The running game, we have 2 pretty solid backs. Sean Shivers is the transfer, number 2. He's the starter. He's a transfer from Auburn. Very solid player. He's extremely tough. Powerful runner between the tackles. He has been hit a bunch this year, highlight reel big hits. And every single time he gets back up and just walks back to the huddle. Incredibly tough runner. And I think he could do a lot of damage if Nebraska's run game has looked like it does in the past. The other running back is Josh Henderson. number 26. He's getting a lot more playing time each game. Personally, I really like him. I actually think he's more talented than Shivers. He's definitely more of the receiving back. He made an incredible one-handed catch last week. I definitely recommend seeking out the highlight. But it looked like he just stuck his hand out there and stuck in there from the running back position. Incredibly impressive. The offensive line is okay. The fast pace is usually good for them. We were well conditioned. But I do think that the running game for Indiana will be pretty effective this week.
Would you say the offensive line is okay, or is the offensive line more similar to Nebraska's, just a little bit more serviceable than that? I would say they give up a lot of sacks. If you look at the stats on Bazelak, I think he's rushed for minus 50 or something crazy. He's had 20 attempts. Yeah. So I'm not sure how many times.
College rushing stats are a little skewed for quarterbacks because sacks count as negative rushing yards. But Bazelak has actually been relatively mobile. He's willing to run to pick up first downs. They've called a few zone reads for him, but definitely giving up a lot of sacks. I'd say the offensive line is probably a little bit better than Nebraska's, but they're probably on similar levels.
I think they've got to be better than Nebraska's, because I would argue that Nebraska has one of the most defeated and broken down lines right now. You've got 3 guys who are contributors who are not playing, right? You had the starting left guard from Nebraska out last year. You had the starting left tackle this year out. You now have the backup guard cross tackle out. So they're just so depleted. It's hard to imagine a world where Nebraska can compete, even with a weaker defensive line or defensive front at all at Indiana, just because they have so many guys out. But we're going to have to see. Jake, I want to move on here to talk about the receivers at IU. Do they have any weapons? I know in the past couple of years they've had some good guys, but what's happened in the last 6 months or in the transfer portal? Have they gotten anybody?
Yeah. I mean, listen, Bazelak's throwing the ball so many times. He's got to be thrown to someone, right? Number 1 receiver, Cam Camper. He's similar to Anthony Grant. He's the number 2 overall JUCO wide receiver transfer. He's been incredibly consistent so far in the passing game. Clearly the number 1 option for IU. 3 out of the 4 weeks, he's had at least 8 catches for 90 yards, 2 weeks over 100. And he's definitely a guy who's going to be fed a lot. I expect him to get at least 10 to 12 targets. The number 2 option is DJ Matthews. He's a short, more slot possession type receiver. He's a little bit banged up, so we'll see how much action he gets. He's had a slow start to the season because of the injuries, but he's going to be out there and making some plays, hopefully get a ball in space. The most interesting receiver for Indiana is the guy I mentioned earlier, Donovan McCulley, 4-star quarterback recruit. And he clearly was one of those guys who in high school was bigger, faster, stronger than everybody else. So that's why they put him at quarterback and just let him go to work. But when he went against Big Ten defenses, not ready for the job. Moved into receiver, though, and his big body athleticism helps him out there. He's getting more and more playing times, more and more targets every single week. And I would definitely look to him to make a big play today or tomorrow on Saturday. I think Indiana's going to try to target him deep down the middle.
And then they've got a tight end who's pretty good, but they haven't used him very much.
Exactly. A.J. Barner, very athletic guy. He reminds me of Peyton Hendershot, our tight end last year, now on the Dallas Cowboys. Big body, soft hands guy, and I definitely would love IU to use him more in the red zone.
Nice. Okay. So when we talk about the biggest matchup, I would say it's got to be Nebraska's defense against IU's O. Is that the biggest matchup of the day? Because if Nebraska can't stop their offense, this is going to be a complete shootout like we saw against Georgia Southern.
Completely agree. I mean, I think Nebraska is expecting to do better on defense now that they've gotten rid of Chenander. And we're really going to see that put to the test. If Indiana is able to run the ball like Georgia Southern was, like Northwestern was, I think Indiana is going to have a lot of success on offense because running is going to be able to set up the pass, set up the high speed. Indiana staying on schedule with that high tempo offense could lead to a lot of points. So I think that definitely is going to be the number 1 key aspect is going to be that Indiana run game. Can they keep the ball out of Bazelak's hands, prevent him from making these mistakes with the sailed throws, limiting the turnover potential?
Joe, you're asking what happened to the receiver from the first game. Are we talking about IGC? Because he's been on the field a little bit, but he has not played much. And I think that's a good question that none of us are getting answered. I'm not sure why he hasn't played as much. There were a couple games where he got in, but he wasn't targeted. But yeah, no answer as to why not. Getting through chat, guys. Sorry, I've been going through our notes. High Mountain Guy says Nebraska stopping anyone is the first issue in any game going forward. And here's the thing, Jake. Bazelak sails passes like we talked about. He's going to pay for a couple of them. if you have the athletic DBs back there making good plays, and you've got a guy like Marquise Buford who's been a turnover machine. You have some athletic guys in the backfield, but can they capitalize is the question. There are going to be bad balls thrown by IU. And because there are going to be so many thrown by IU, I think Nebraska is going to get at least one opportunity to make something happen. And that could be a game changer, because if this is a one-score game like it's projected, one turnover could shift all of that. I don't see Casey as a guy who's going to have any. You never know. It's just so 50-50 with Nebraska. But I don't see Casey as a guy who's going to have a turnover in this game, because the IU defense isn't as strong as some of these other ones he's played against.
Well, I will say this about IU's defense. They make a huge emphasis on turnovers. They definitely go super hard for fumbles, super hard for picks. Tom Allen D is predicated on turning the ball over. So I think Indiana will probably get one or two. Indiana already has 7 turnovers so far in the season through 4 games. So they're swarming D.
That's a good point. I didn't even know that. So then that could be a differentiator. So if Nebraska does lose the turnover battle, there's no way they can keep up with IU this whole game. That's the question mark, right? Can Nebraska play a non-sloppy game? Because we haven't gotten to see that yet, unfortunately.
Connor, I would argue that Indiana has the second best defense that Nebraska's faced this year. That's not saying a ton. I would say behind Oklahoma, they're probably the second best defense Nebraska has faced this year. I would argue that they're better than Georgia Southern. I would argue that they're
probably better than them. I don't know about Northwestern.
Not by much. Not by much.
But you got to realize IU's defense has not been good.
No,
I would argue that Northwestern might be a better D than IU this year.
I think they're strong at the linebacker position right now. Just what I know about them.
Oh, this linebacker position is definitely the strength of our defense. You got Cam Jones, the captain of middle linebacker, and Dason McCullough. We haven't mentioned him. True freshman, an absolute beast. He already has 3 sacks in the season. He's 6'5". Indiana's highest rated recruit ever. Period. He's only a 4-star. Don't know how he wasn't a 5-star. His dad was Indiana's running backs coach last year, which is obviously how we got him to commit. He's now at Notre Dame, but I'm expecting him to come back in a bigger role, if only to make sure that his son does not transfer out, because he is an absolute beast and a game changer on the outside linebacker pass rushing.
Connor, I would agree with you, though. With them sailing balls like this, the defense, they just need to turn around and play the ball and stop face guarding so much. There's been so much face guarding this year where they've had opportunities. If they just turned around and played the ball, and I know you want to coach face guarding in a lot of cases, especially if you're playing catch up with the receiver, if you're getting burned, but there's been times where they didn't need to face guard. I've noticed the secondary for Nebraska. They've had chances. And I think
I'm not
probably
sure if
the
they
best
lack experience or what their deal is, because you're right. They don't turn and try and make a play. It's got to be an experience issue, or they're not being coached to do it.
the only one. The only one, and he has the 2 interceptions that the defense has. And he
right. Maybe having a guy like Bill Bush in now to come and correct some things. They had this whole bye week to try and figure something out. And if you're watching on film and these guys just play straight in their face and don't turn their heads, that's the correctable issue that they were able to figure out in the past 2 weeks. So there's a lot of question marks. We really don't know much, because there is going to be so much difference on the field. Different tackling practice, right? So there's going to be a different strategy with that this last couple of weeks, and we're going to see the results of it. There's going to be different DB practices going on, because I know that Travis Fisher was tasked with working with Bill Bush to get some things tightened up. Obviously, the entire defense could be reworked to some degree. I know there are 3 or 4 guys on defense who are going to play, and we haven't really seen much of them this year. Omar Brown's probably the most notable one who's going to play more. But yeah, it's just a lot of unknowns. One other thing I wanted to talk about was IU in the first half, Jake. They have not had many games where they started off hot. It's usually a second half day for them. So what do you think the situation is with them going into Nebraska? Is this a game where you think they start slow? Do you think that they come back towards the end? What do we need to watch for IU-wise?
I mean, it's been every game. Indiana's gotten off to a really slow start every single game. We've been losing at halftime every single game. And we've had incredibly strong second half adjustments and comebacks. I would expect probably the exact same. I think Indiana, just as we've seen, is probably going to get off to a slow start on offense. And Nebraska will probably have a 7-point lead at halftime, is my guess, if not 14. And I think one of the real tests for Nebraska is going to be that Indiana is going to make some adjustments at halftime. And how will Nebraska adjust to the adjustments with this brand new coaching staff? I think that could be definitely key for the game.
Yeah, I think that because you have some adjustments come with the coaches, that could make IU a little confused and have to play a couple different things. And if Nebraska can get out to a decent start, say 10-point lead at some point, which maybe that's not even realistic. We don't know what we're going to see because there are so many different variations in Nebraska that could pop out. But if they did come out positive, got a 10-point lead, that could be the difference between this game, especially if it's a tight one. And if IU can't fight back in the second half as well as they've been able to in the past.
I think they have to have a first half lead by double digits. Otherwise, they're not going to have a chance because this defense is going to have problems late in the game when they're getting up and past the 75, 80 play mark, which I'm almost certain is going to happen. I think that they have.
100%, and that's definitely a contributing factor to why Indiana is successful later in games. The offensive conditioning and just wearing out the defense play after play after play after play with this high tempo, fast paced offense has been working so far. Even against Cincinnati, Indiana was down 28 points at halftime, and Cincinnati only scored one touchdown in the second half after a punt that pinned us at the 4. We went forward on fourth down because we were down 14 foolishly. So
yeah, IU really gave that game away. They had a really good chance against Cincinnati that day. That
16.5 was brutal.
That just pissed me off watching it. Okay, so going off your prediction, we've got right now Nebraska's moved from a 3.5-point favorite opener. It's now moved up to a 5.5. If you had to take one, Jake, what are you thinking?
I mean, I'm going to take Indiana. I think Indiana has a good shot to outright win this game. The way that Nebraska's defense has played so far this season, I think it may be unrealistic to expect a significant change in only 1 week. I know it's technically 2 weeks with the bye, but still, I mean, they haven't played a game since Chandler's fired. We don't necessarily know what they're going to do. And I think while Nebraska has a decent shot to win this game, I think it's going to be pretty close and pretty competitive throughout. So I'm going to take Indiana plus 5.5 in this spot.
I want to take Nebraska, but because that's so many points, 5 just feels like a lot. I've probably got to roll IU if I had to make a pick. I won't be playing this game. I'm going to be sitting off this
if
one.
I'm going to make any pick in this game, it's going to be the over.
That's the only fair pick to make because 60 points actually isn't even that big of a deal. For a Nebraska game at this point, they're giving up enough and they're going to be able to score enough on a weaker D. I think Nebraska at least scores 35, maybe 28, and IU at least gets to 30s. So I'm going to roll with it. Roll with the over. Chase says Nebraska by 11.
I think Nebraska needs to get off to a hot start because if Indiana gets off to a lead, Nebraska is going to have to, as you said, Anthony Grant's probably the strength of the team, and they're going to want to get him going. So if they get too far behind and force a throw, that allows Indiana to then run against the weak run defense. Nebraska definitely wants to have Indiana in a position where they're throwing because that, A, is not running against them, which is their weakness, and B, puts them in position to get turnovers.
Fair enough. We've got some overtakers, some Nebraska takers. Larry says IU D is bad. Nebraska's D is horrific. Nebraska won't be able to handle the aerial attack. The O-line is worse than IU has seen. IU 48, Nebraska 10. I think that's a little unrealistic. Nebraska's offense isn't that bad. Nebraska's offense has struggled, but we're coming off a game against OU where they played against one of the top defensive minds in college football, and that OU team was fired up to play in Lincoln. So I'm not sure IU can replicate that style of D on Nebraska. I would say if Nebraska does lose this game, it's not going to be by more than 14 points. And keep in mind, they have had some horrific outings this year so far. I think 14 would be the maximum I'd be willing to lay for IU, and that'd be on their best day. Keep in mind.
There's also a chance that Nebraska could absolutely blow us out. Memorial Stadium at night is a very difficult place to play.
Nothing would surprise me at this point. 48-10 in either direction would not surprise me.
I honestly couldn't see either team winning by more than 14 points at this rate, the way they've both been playing, because there's been so much sloppiness to it, right? IU played against Illinois, and I remember watching that game and thinking, God, Illinois and IU suck so bad. And it made me feel so much better about Nebraska after I watched them lose to Northwestern. And the sloppy play has just continued throughout the Big Ten. Well, mostly the Big Ten West. IU isn't that much different from Nebraska, and because of that, that's why I think it's going to be a closer game. That's just where I'm leaning. I got another good comment. Here we go from Memphis. Are all three of you in your bedrooms? I like that. So Dennon's in his studio, actually. I'm in my bedroom and Jake's in his bedroom. Looks pretty good back here, though, right? This is an iconic set where we built the studio and where it will continue to live on.
I think he's commenting on my zebra blanket back there on my couch. Probably thinks
Who
that's my
knows? You got
bed blanket.
you got a solid studio. I like it. One day I'll have one of those, but it'll always have a bed in it.
Yeah, you
Scott
guys have
says the
great
night game
setups.
in Lincoln is the spread. I think that's why Nebraska is getting the extra points. But if you look at that Georgia Southern game, it was nighttime and didn't help the defense at all. Here we go.
Well,
We
I'll
got
also
Crypto
say this,
Badger.
Scott. Traditionally home field in a spread is worth 3 points. So Nebraska opened up -3.5, which is exactly accounting for that. And the line has been bet up all the way to 5.5, 6.5. So there's a lot of people and a lot of money on Nebraska already.
I don't know why. That's the weird. It's bizarre. Who is doing that?
Nebraska has a better talent pool than IU does. So people are still following based on what Nebraska has the potential to do. That's strictly what it is. IU's not as talented. But we realize that talent doesn't win these games. Talent doesn't win these games. So that's the one thing. Badger has got a $20 super chat. Thank you, Badger, for the support. Guys, just so you know, Badger and I hopped on the phone this week. We've been texting. He and I are homies now, so he's a real-life executive producer.
Yeah.
IU, if I bet it, you can't get Nebraska until our D has proven it's learned to play better. And that's kind of the situation. No one can trust taking Nebraska right now because the defense has been letting everything go past them, because it can come down to the crunch. Nebraska could be up by 6, 7, whatever. And they might let a team storm the entire field 90 yards in a minute and 10 seconds, and then that busts your cover. So yeah, it's a dangerous play. It's a dangerous play.
I got another line that I'm curious about. How I think it's at 4 right now. How many game-stopping injuries Indiana will have?
Well, Thomas Allen
On
Jr. was
defense,
incredibly
on
injury
defense.
prone last time Indiana played Nebraska, but he's graduated, so I think Indiana's going to be a lot healthier this game.
Yeah, the last time, I don't know if you guys remember this, the last time IU and Nebraska played back in 2019 in Memorial Stadium, Tom Allen's son went down with a lot of stupid injuries, and they basically played that injury game the whole way through, just trying to slow down the pace because Nebraska was marching the field at some points. Basically cheated. That guy isn't there.
Thomas Allen Jr. had a lot of injuries. Are you really denigrating the coach's son for being glass that day?
For walking and then all of a sudden falling after the play?
That guy was a cheater.
I call faking injuries on defense one step above a pick play on offense.
Yeah, I don't know about
one
that.
step cheesy.
I could see, though, Nebraska trying to get revenge with that same strategy, especially with Indiana running a much faster-paced offense this year.
That's why I brought it up, because there's a chance that if I'm the defensive coordinator, if I am in Bill Bush's shoes right now, that card is totally on the table. That card is totally on the table.
So, Bill,
did your ankle get hurt? Did your ankle get hurt? To sit down on the field. Sit down on the field.
No, they're cheaters. Bill, I saw your.
Well, Thomas Allen Jr. had a legitimate injury after the game. He missed some time after that game for sure.
I don't want to hear about any of that. That's all BS. He cheated that whole game. Okay, moving on. Moving on from Thomas Allen Jr. Bill, I saw your chat. You said that the season sucks, but your Corn Crazed gear doesn't. Thank you for supporting. Thank you to everybody who supported this last week. I sent out over 35 merch orders yesterday, so we had a ton of sales, and yeah, it makes me feel good when we have sales because I love repping the merch, and I'm glad you guys too. Daniel, we haven't talked about Lane Kiffin in this video yet. Do you want to touch on Lane Kiffin, Jake? What are your thoughts on Nebraska's chances to get a coach like that? Because it's going to be really tough to pull him away from Ole Miss, where he's got something he's building. He's making a lot of money already. Let's see what Lane Kiffin is making at Ole Miss right now. I think it's $7 million. Lane Kiffin's salary. He's making 7.25 this season. To pull him to Nebraska, say you gave him 9 or 10, I just think that Ole Miss could match that, right? Or another bigger school.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, and Nebraska. Let's say what it is. Nebraska could afford to pay their coach and make him the highest paid coach in sports. Period. Not football, not baseball, not college, just any sport. They can afford to make their coach the highest paid coach. $70 million a year coming into every single Big Ten team. I mean, Northwestern 2 days ago just announced they're tearing down their stadium and building a new $800 million facility. So the Big Ten can basically afford to pry any coach away, except for coaches from the SEC. I think those schools are also making a ton of money for the media deals. So I think that Ole Miss will have the ability to match Lane Kiffin if Nebraska really wanted to get him. So then it would come down to, where does Lane Kiffin want to be at? Where does he think he has a better chance to win? I know he has some, previous connections with Nebraska, but it does seem like he's building a really strong program at Ole Miss. He has a lot more experience in the SEC. I think he's probably likely to stay where he's at right now, is my prediction.
I do too. I just think it'd be really tough to pull him into the Big Ten, where he has not coached yet. He's got SEC and Pac-12 experience. I think he might have even had some NFL experience, but yeah, Lane to me is a very, very long shot for Nebraska. And even with the comments he's made this past week about fans not being able to fill up the stands, he also made comments about, he didn't make a comment. He just retweeted something saying Lane should take over at Auburn or at Nebraska. And he's a little bit of a troll on Twitter, so I wouldn't read too much into that. Lane knows how to play the game and get attention. And because of that, it's going to get everybody fired up and triggered. But the reality is Lane is a long shot. And as much as I'd want him here, probably not the right opportunity for him. Here's another thing about making one of these coaches the highest paid of all time. If you've got a coach like Urban Meyer, and there are so many people debating me on this one, Urban Meyer is proven you know what you're getting in him. If you make him the highest paid coach, you know that you're going to get a championship out of it. It's kind of like what you're doing with Dabo Swinney at Clemson. He's already won 2. And because he's won 2, or I don't know, has he won 1, 2, whatever, he's been to at least 2 or 3. You could give Dabo that Supermax 10-year, $11.5 million a year deal because you knew what you were getting. You don't want to take the direction that Michigan State did and give a guy like Mel Tucker $10 million a year. Then the next year realize, oh, wait, this guy can't even get to a bowl game. I honestly think Mel Tucker might go 5-7 this year. Michigan State, they're on a bad run, and they're
looking terrible the last 2 weeks. Absolutely terrible.
Terrible.
Phoenix
so
really just put a dagger in them and ended their season.
Yeah, they look terrible. So you don't want to be Nebraska and say, because we have it and because we can, we're going to put ourselves in another position to
right. No, I'm not saying
look at Texas A&M,
the highest paid coach in the history of sports. But if they
I'm
have
not
a chance
take away Lane.
Meyer, they got
take away Lane. Take away Lane.
Yeah.
We're talking about just the potential, right? Because yes, Nebraska can do a lot of things, and a lot of these schools can. But what's the right thing to do versus what's too risky? You look at Texas A&M, and they did the same thing with Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher could be gone there next year. And if they got rid of him next year because he had the number 1 class back-to-back years, but he could never win more than 8 games, they now owe him how much? $50 million or something stupid? I don't know what his buyout is. Do not quote me on it. But the point is, they promised him way too much up front because they wanted to pull him from Florida State. So what's a realistic number to give a guy versus what has he proven?
You also want to create
Urban
runway.
has proven something.
You want to create...
Yeah.
You have to still be able to financially build in incentives for bowl games, wins, progression over a couple of years. You can't throw the kitchen sink at a coach.
Well,
the
system's broken. The system's broken, right? Because the system doesn't incentivize you to be successful. The system is paying coaches for what their past progress was. So if a coach was able, like Leipold, was able to build a school like Kansas from 0 to 100, he's getting paid for that at his next school. Same thing happened with Scott Frost. He never got paid for what he actually did at Nebraska. He got paid for what he did at UCF. So the system's broken. In the ideal world, and this will never happen because it's now too far gone. The ideal world says, coach comes in, we have metrics, and you're paid based off your performance to some degree. But because there are so many other suitors out there, there are 130 something universities who want to hire all these coaches. They can just go out and say, no, pay me for my prior performance for what I've done, which...
Yeah, it's going to be tough for a coach to accept that when they know that there's other schools out there who are willing to pay them guaranteed money and not, on a per win basis.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying maybe you don't fire Watt at a Urban Meyer. I think you could get Lance for a decent price, and I think you could get Aranda for a reasonable price. Aranda's going to be more expensive than Lance, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, that's because Baylor would have more money to spend than Kansas would. I think that's the difference, right? Baylor's going to be able to say, we'll pay $7 or $8 million a year for Aranda. Kansas won't be able to pay $8 million a year for their coach. Kansas probably has a limit of $5 million. That's my guess. I don't know.
If that.
The Big 12.
Yeah, are you sure it's
a lot of money for the Big 12?
Are you sure it's Aranda doesn't want to stay at Baylor because those podcast guys, the On Baylor or whatever their name is, guys that were just dogging Nebraska as a program, not understanding why that coach would want to come here? I could tell you why.
I didn't even watch
Number
it.
one reason. That show where they talked about Nebraska is their highest viewed show they've ever done. That's why. That fan base.
People know if you make.
They just use Nebraska.
Nebraska equals ratings, baby.
Nebraska equals algorithm
equals
on YouTube. Yeah. Their number one viewed show. I watched that, and I watched about 5 minutes of it. I'm like, these guys are clowns. Oh, why would you go to that? It's a terrible school. What do you go? You got to Baylor. Yeah, it's called resources. There's way more at Nebraska. Way more fan
Yeah, there's
support.
a lot more going on. I did a whole video breakdown about that for a reason because
Yeah,
people have to
Connor, you
realize
did
why
a great
Nebraska
video
can
about
win.
it. And I think also, like, you look at Nebraska and you look at Indiana at their coaching searches, and you can just see that even though these two schools are both in the Big Ten, they're both making a lot of money every single year on these media rights deals. There's just vastly different expectations and vastly different, coordinator and coach gets. For example,
Yep.
both Indiana and Nebraska got new offensive coordinators this offseason. Nebraska went out and got one of the biggest names out there, Mark Whipple, who coached the Biletnikoff Winter Trophy, who coached a Heisman finalist, the first quarterback drafted in Kenny Pickett. Who does Indiana get? Indiana gets Walt Bell, a former UMass head coach who got fired after going 2-23. So Nebraska still has a lot of clout, a lot of ability to get good coaches, and anyone who's kind of dogging on them and coaching not want to go there doesn't really understand college football.
Why did they have to settle for that? Because they don't have the same brand power that a school like Nebraska has. And that's what people don't realize. These schools can't just go out and hire the best guys unless they have the brand power and the money to bring them in. So it's a great point. I think Whipple's getting like $900,000 or $800,000+ this year to be at Nebraska. So I don't think IU would have been able to pull that off. Here's a good question from Tanner. We didn't get to it. I forgot about it. He said, take a shot on an up-and-coming coordinator like Jim Leonard at Wisconsin. What do we have to lose at this point? All right, I'm going to give my take on what we have to lose, and then I'm going to let Jake and Denon talk about this. Nebraska cannot take a shot on anybody. They have to find someone who's proven and who can win now, because we are now at the point where we've already gone through what I would like to call the worst of it. Because if it gets any worse than this, the sellout streak is done. The tier 2 conversation after falling out of tier 1 is done. Nebraska will be sinking even deeper. It's already a sinking ship. It will be a sunken ship. They have to find a guy who can actually write this. Jim Leonard has been a good defensive coordinator at a defensive powerhouse school. It was already built for him. All he had to do was come in and keep the ship running. He didn't have to do anything new. He didn't have to revive anything. At Nebraska, you're going to have to take a blank slate of a mess, and you're going to have to piece it all together. The offense, the defense, the culture, everything that goes into the program. Jim Leonard has the skills to work on a defense that's already been good, that we know about. He may be good at rebuilding a defense, but we don't know for sure because he never had to do it. That's why you can't take the shot. Am I wrong in that?
You're 100% right. I have a lot of respect for him, and man, I'd love to have him as a defensive coordinator. That'd be great. If they could pull that off, that'd be perfect. But I wouldn't take a shot at him as head coach. I think if he ever becomes a head coach, it will be at Wisconsin.
The entire chat, just so we're on the same page, everybody in chat agrees. So, yeah, we can't take a shot like that. It's too.
Yeah,
too
I mean, it's like you
much
said,
of a
Connor,
risk
in your
right
video. Being a head coach at a Big Ten program is like being the CEO of a major company, and you need to have some sort of experience. People don't even realize college football has changed so much in the last 2 years that these jobs, I don't even know if any of the big schools in the Big Ten will ever hire a coordinator again from another school. I think they're all going to go after either their own, coordinators to promote or other head coaches that are out there. I mean, if you like what Wisconsin's defense has done, you can get Dave Aranda, who was Wisconsin's defensive coordinator, and LSU's defensive coordinator, and Baylor's head coach, and has proven it a lot more, and the money is not an issue.
He is the number one, by the way, in my opinion, Dave Aranda. That is the number. Well, I take that back. I changed my answer. Lance is my number one, then Aranda. But they are the two of them. There's a big gap between those two and everybody else, and then you got the rest of them down there.
The one that people don't like to talk about is Matt Campbell, because he's had such an average, it just feels average stint at Iowa State. He hasn't been able to win the close games. He has kind of a Nebraska complex down there at Iowa State. But Matt Campbell brings a lot to the table that some of these other coaches don't. He's an offensive line coach. Before anything else, that is the biggest thing we should make a note of. He knows how to build the O-line. He's already put plenty of skill position guys into the NFL. That could be a really intriguing hire, even though it would be the least flashy and the most boring hire, right? People would try and compare it to Mike Riley a little bit from the outside, but the reality is Matt Campbell might be a massive play. And I don't think he'd be that expensive. Let's see what Matt Campbell's getting. I want to get an idea because
He's also beat Iowa.
Campbell also coached Brock Purdy, Chubb's older brother, so he's familiar at least with what Purdy can bring to an offense.
Exactly. Campbell's getting $4 million a year. Nebraska could give him 5 or 6. They could risk it on him, right? You could keep Campbell for 3 or 4 years and see if he could get it going. And if you fired him, you wouldn't be throwing everything at him to buy him out, right?
There's not a lot of risk with him, in my opinion. I
don't think so either. He's a
I think
7-win coach minimum.
Yeah, and you can afford 7 wins for a few years. That is better than where they are now, and it's not dropping off. So the risk factor with him, I agree with you, isn't that high. It's worth $5-6 million, in my opinion, because I have $5-6 million to throw around, so I know what that feels like.
Okay, really, yeah, I like that comment. Okay, really quick, this is a comment that came from Jack. Someone please name the baggage instead of just saying baggage. I'm going to assume this has to do with Urban Meyer, because when we talk about baggage, that's the comment I've been seeing the most on my channel, and everyone keeps commenting on the channel. Urban Meyer has too much baggage. All this baggage talk. What are we talking about? What baggage does Urban Meyer have? He kicked one of his players nudgingly as a term of endearment because that's the way he is as a guy. He's sure that doesn't work in 2022, but he wasn't going out to hurt his kicker or mess with him or demean him. That's just the type of coach he is. The type of coaches I had when I was growing up, those dudes would slap me on the back of the head. They spit at the ground in front of my feet. They'd make all kinds of foul ass jokes. That was the life I lived and the life a lot of other football players lived. And we live in a much more sensitive society now. Sure, he needs to change, but that's not the world he grew up in, unfortunately. That's the first piece of baggage people talk about with Urban Meyer at the Jaguars. Second thing with the Jaguars that happened, he was at a bar feeling some chick up. He didn't have a sex tape. We don't even know if he slept with that chick. We don't know if he cheated on his wife. He just so happened to be at a bar doing something he shouldn't have been doing. Morality police, not me. I don't care what he's doing in his personal time. He got caught feeling up on some chick, and we don't even know the full context of the story. So you're telling me that's baggage? Okay, what other baggage? Ohio State, we're talking about, people try to talk about how he left Ohio State. Okay, he left Ohio State with Ryan Day, a guy who's carrying on the legacy that he led. They are going to win more national championships there. And because Urban came in after the Jim Tressel era and brought it back to I would say, not even brought it back, brought it to a higher place than what it was when Jim Tressel was there. I would say that was a benefit for Ohio State to have him, even though he left in the way he did.
I mean, Ohio State had been sanctioned before Urban even got there. With Jim Tressel, when they had the Terrell Pryor situation with the tattoos.
Right.
I remember my freshman year, 2012, Ohio State was ineligible for postseason play. And that was long before Urban Meyer got there. I would say maybe some of the other baggage.
Wait, really quick. Pause really quick right here before you continue with the baggage. Chat. A, Urban has too much baggage. B, what is this baggage talk? A for too much baggage. B for not too much baggage. Come on, chat. I mean, this is ridiculous. Do you guys really think this is too much? There are coaches who are doing really foul things in life. What has he done? Okay, chat's on B. B. I mean, a 1A. I see 1A. Most people don't care about that because this is BS baggage. This isn't real baggage. He didn't go to jail. He doesn't have some sexual assault case against him. I mean, I understand people saying they don't like Urban Meyer because they don't like that he leaves too quick. That is a reason to not like him. You think he's going to come in for 3 years and then dip out. Okay, I understand. You feel like he won't be loyal. But come on. Even if he brought in his staff and revived the culture and left, Nebraska would be in a better place than it was today. That's just my thought.
And that kick the player thing was BS. Just total BS.
Dude, I got nudged by my coaches all the time. Come on. Anyway, okay, sorry, Jake. I didn't want to cut you off, but I want you to keep talking.
No, you're all good.
I wasn't taking showers with players.
I was only saying that maybe some of the baggage that we considered is the fact that he doesn't really care what his players do off the field. You look at the Florida teams, Aaron Hernandez, Pouncey brothers, they were getting a lot of issues off the field. So maybe that could be considered a baggage and a bad look. But again, I think if Nebraska's winning on the field, they'll accept some headlines off the field.
There's less of that at Nebraska because it's not in Florida.
That's very true.
It'd be like Indiana. There's just not as much opportunity. Not saying
look, Indiana, there's always stories about the basketball team getting off into shenanigans.
Yeah.
So
sometimes you
definitely get into trouble anywhere.
Yeah, there's sometimes players that are prone to it.
Here's a comment from Robert. He says, remember Barry Switzer. Urban is an apostle compared to Barry Switzer. So my dad's friends with Barry, just so you guys know. I'm not sure if you guys saw that in my other video. But anyway, one of the stories Barry told my dad was about when he'd go on recruiting trips back in the day. And he'd go into a neighborhood and he'd tell the family, or he'd tell his recruiting assistant, go in the trash and figure out what type of beer they drink. Then the assistant would come back and tell him, and he'd be sitting at the counter eating dinner with them or whatever. And they say, hey, Barry, what type of beer you like? And he'd say, oh, I like whatever's in your fridge. He'd say exactly what they had in their fridge. And they get excited and stand up and jump around, right? And they'd be all pumped up. And then he would know that if they were, let's say they're a religious family, he would make sure he stayed in town that night so that the next morning he'd go to church with them. So they'd say, hey, Barry, what are you doing tomorrow? Whatever. He's like, oh, I got to get back to OU, but I really want to make sure I get to church. And they're like, well, you can come with us. So Barry knew exactly what he was doing in recruiting. He knew how to get those players riled in, and he's got some really good stories. So anyway, I don't know about the bad things you're referring to, Robert, but I have heard some pretty positive stories about the Barry era. He was a womanizer, though, from what I've heard.
Yes.
Let's see. Mark D'Antonio. I want to talk about that because that's another guy that's been brought up a few times. Is Mark D'Antonio done coaching, period, Jake?
I don't know if he's done coaching, period, but I certainly don't think that Nebraska should be looking at him. I think that he could definitely look to kind of maybe look what Mac Brown did. He was at Texas, retired, went to a smaller program, UNC. So similar thing, Mark D'Antonio, Michigan State. Maybe he goes to like a Pac-12 team or a Big 12 team, AAC team in the future. I see that being more of a spot for him, at least until he proves that he can do it again, than Nebraska. No chance for Nebraska, Mark D'Antonio.
He didn't have a good ending. It was kind of anticlimactic. He had some good seasons there, but nothing for me from Mark.
He
D'Antonio.
really fell off once
see
he lost Pat
exciting.
Narduzzi to Pitt. I think Narduzzi is probably the real talent there.
That would make sense. He was carried. Yeah, a lot of people are still trying to bring up some of these other coaches. They're not interested in Mark D'Antonio. Frost is never going to get away from that closet. Yeah, I don't know, chat. I think that there are so many coaches that we could talk about and so many you can look into, but it's all on Trev at this point. He's got to start doing some interviews. Guys, if you want to join the chat, you can jump in on the waiting room on Discord. I'll pull somebody in right now. Just go to Discord, drag your name into the waiting room, and I can pull you in if you want to be on.
Yeah. I think there's really three choices for Nebraska for head coach. I think it's either Aranda, Leopold, or Meyer. I think it's got to be one of those three guys at this point.
Right now, but I think things can change as we go. What do you think about Brian Flores?
I think he's a good coach. I don't know if he's looking to go to college, but I certainly think that Nebraska could do a lot worse. I think he'd be a very interesting candidate.
He's past college age. Of course he doesn't want to go to college.
People are mentioning a lot of college coaches right now, or NFL coaches right now for this college job. And I think that you got to go with a guy who has more experience, and you can't get a guy who just has NFL experience only. That's why the Eric Bieniemy thing kind of gets held up. Eric Bieniemy has been a solid offensive coordinator in Kansas City, and Kansas City's had really productive offenses. And I'm sure he could bring some value to Nebraska, but what experience that he's gotten in Kansas City will translate to the college game? Don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
What do you think about PJ Fleck?
I think Fleck's a great coach. So, if Nebraska can pry him away from Minnesota, that weakens Minnesota. It strengthens Nebraska. I would certainly think that they should do their due diligence on him. I just think it's probably less likely because Minnesota is going to have the resources to at least match an offer. They really love Fleck. He's brought that program up from pretty low depths. I think Nebraska should definitely take a look at him. I just don't know how likely it is.
Before Minnesota, PJ Fleck, yes. After Minnesota, PJ Fleck, no. Can't stand it.
Okay, let's ask chat then. Chat, A for PJ Fleck, B for a hell no. A for PJ, B for a hell no. Let's see what chat thinks, because I'm probably on board with the Fleck game. Wow, a lot of B's. A lot more B's than A's. Okay, people are not on the Fleck game. Wow, people are.
Hell no.
It's a 50-50. It's a mix. It's a mix. The chat is B. Chat says no PJ.
This guy took the time to go uppercase, lowercase, uppercase, lowercase.
Yeah. Some people are saying A. Chat, explain to me why Why no PJ? Someone come in. Someone get in the waiting room. Come on, let's do a live call in right now and explain to me why you don't want PJ Fleck. Because PJ Fleck's winning. PJ Fleck's got a top defense in the country. PJ Fleck is allowing, I think, like 8 points a game or something stupid right now. The defense is awesome. The offense is thriving. They got a really good running back room. Their run game's awesome. They're scoring like 40 points a game, something. Most people are saying it's his personality, and some people are saying that they don't want a current Big Ten head coach. They don't want to steal away, I guess. Here we go. Nick's coming in. Nick, can you hear me? Nick left right when I tried to bring him in.
No.
Come on, Nick.
Okay, so people are saying Fleck's a known weirdo. Okay, here's Nick.
There it is.
Nick, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Are you anti PJ Fleck?
No, I don't know. I don't think he'd be an awful choice, but I don't think he'd be like the top greatest choice either.
And who would your pick be?
I've been talking to all my friends about how Kansas coach Lance. I love Kansas. I think it's one of the coolest things that they're finally doing good.
Here's one thing that I'm afraid of. I'll be honest. Kansas is so flash in the pan, and it's so exciting. And because we haven't seen anything like this in so long from Lawrence, that we're all getting head over heels turned up, and we really want to see it continue. And we're becoming genuine fans of it. And because we're so invested, we're now saying, wait, if it could happen to them, maybe it could happen to us. But the reality is, this could be a one-time show. So 100%. We might be so dialed in on this Kansas deal, but the reality is there's one of these coaches who's not as flashy, Matt Campbell, PJ Fleck, somebody who is more realistic. Because what happened the last time you hired a coach? Scott Frost. Exciting. Flash in the pan. We've never seen something like this. This is a coach who's taken a non-Power 5 team to a massive bowl game and beating Auburn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds dangerous. Something to be aware of. People are getting hyped up on Leipold, but he could be a Frost 2.0. Oh, here we go. Robert said Lance Leipold can't let it become a Frost 2. I'm assuming he's saying 2.0.
I watched that coach teach people how to swing a hammer and hold a nail. Scott Frost was all about swinging the hammer, in my opinion.
And
great bringing in skill players. Offensive line, terrible. Defensive line, we had 1 year was
anything.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, it's funny that you're comparing Leipold to Frost because I feel like they had completely opposite paths as they made their way through coaching. Like Frost started off at big universities, Oregon offensive coordinator, then to a Group 5 head coaching job. And pretty he was a shooting star, rising super fast. Leipold has been coaching for 20, 30 years. He was in D3. He was in Buffalo. He's won and turned programs around at all these levels. 100% understand the argument that Kansas is a flash in the pan. It's only been 3 or 4 games. He did beat Texas last year. And I think the big thing for me is just the eye test. When you look at Kansas's offense, they're awesome. They're a legit team. They're a really strong team. Jalen Daniels is the real deal. And I think that, not that I'm saying that this should be, the reason that Nebraska goes after him, but I think if they get Leipold, then they'll get Jalen Daniels as a transfer as well. And he's a Heisman contender next year.
That's fair. How about Jonathan Smith from Oregon State?
I mean, after Mike Riley, you want to go back to the Oregon State well?
So here's the deal. Oregon State is a really tough place to win, right? And they play in the Pac-12 North. He has turned them around into, I'd say, a stronger team than when Mike Riley had them. They did it with some Nebraska players. They couldn't pull off the win against SC last week, but their run game is really strong. If you're going to take a Pac-12 coach, though, I think you take Kalen DeBoer. I don't think it's Jonathan Smith.
Agreed. I think DeBoer is for sure the move from the Pac-12. He has Big Ten experience in Indiana. The 1 year there, he was incredibly successful. Developed 2 Big Ten caliber starting quarterbacks in that 1 year and done a great job so far at Washington. They did a good job at Fresno State. Jake Haener, incredible last year, incredible offensive stats. So DeBoer has been an incredible offensive success everywhere he's been. And I definitely think Nebraska should take a look at him.
Okay. Another comment that pops up all the time is, what about Mickey Joseph? Guys, it's very simple. Mickey Joseph is a realistic candidate. He's already in-house. He's already there, and he can have the job. The question is, can he win? You have to prove something at this point because Mickey hasn't proven anything in his career yet. from this perspective, right? He's proven it as a position coach. He's proven it now as an associate head coach, as a passing game coordinator, let's say, but he has not proven it as the man who's in charge. He has October, November. He has the next 2 months to prove it. He's already had a 2-week interview audition. So Mickey's still on the table, but we cannot say much about Mickey until we see the win-loss results and until we see the state of the program a month, 2 months from now. So Mickey's
Nebraska
a long
has
shot.
been so bad this year that Mickey Joseph, if he turns him around, is going to be an incredibly strong sign for keeping him as coach. But when we talked about Jim Leonard earlier in the show, everything that we said about a negative for him could be applied to Mickey Joseph as well.
Real quick, guys.
Agreed.
Nick, I think we're good. Do we want to let Nick leave now?
Oh yeah, Nick, thanks
Nick,
for
thank you
coming.
so
Yeah,
much.
I'll leave. Yeah.
Thanks, man. Okay. I just, it was getting awkward. Not that he was awkward. It just, we were getting carried away.
Right. Okay. Well, we've got another coach that's popped up in the chat a few times. Brett Bielema. Brett Bielema, my opinion on this is he's been working with Les at Illinois. And if he would have ended up coming to Nebraska over Illinois, he'd be able to get more done. Is he good enough to revive a broken down program? Because he didn't do it at Arkansas. I think Arkansas lost Petrino, and then he came in. I don't know what the penalty they had. They probably had some sort of penalty. Maybe they didn't even have any penalty. Maybe that was just on Petrino. So he couldn't get Arkansas to any sort of winning ways. And he hasn't done enough at Illinois to make me think that he's some special coach in the Big Ten. I think when you walk into Wisconsin, you've got Barry Alvarez backing you, and they had some consistency before he had gotten there. I think it's just kind of the dream situation for a coach. You just have to make sure it operates smoothly, and you don't need to go above and beyond.
At most, he's a Kirk Ferentz. That's where his career tops out.
Yeah, I think Bielema has shown us that while he can be a solid coach, he's not going to be that game-changing program coach Nebraska's looking for. I think the biggest positive for him for Nebraska is the style of offense that he runs would be a style Nebraska historically has run and had success running with a power run game. But I don't think that's enough of a reason to bring him in.
Fair enough. I agree with that.
Can we segue off of coaches?
In a minute, we have so many comments. I can't
I
segue until
know.
we get there.
It's getting close to the game. It's
What
2
game?
minutes. The NFL.
Oh, do you want to go watch it?
Well, I'm in no hurry. I just, I don't want to have to compete against the NFL.
Oh, we're not competing. Anybody who wants to leave and watch the NFL can go watch the NFL.
I'm kidding.
Corn Crazed is a
comment
much
from
better
Matt.
show anyways.
Matt
I just have a
says
perfect
Mickey-
segue when we're ready.
Okay. Mickey doesn't want the job. It was my understanding the associate head coach title was required to get him here. Why would make that demand if he doesn't want the job? No, I don't think anyone thinks Mickey doesn't want the job. I think people do think he wants the job. There have been questions this week which are a little bit just weird, saying, well, he said he doesn't like to be in front of cameras. That doesn't mean that he doesn't want to be a head coach. I'm sure Mickey's dream is to be a head coach eventually. Maybe he doesn't want to do it right now, or who knows what the reality of his situation is. But ultimately, yes, he does want to be a head coach, and he would not accept a position to be an associate head coach if he didn't want that for his future. So I don't think there's any merit to what people are saying about Mickey not.
Yeah, I just think that someone who gets into coaching, like isn't your end goal to be a head coach? Don't you want to progress in your career? Of course he wants this job.
I think so too. Another one that's popped up a bunch is Les Miles. Les Miles didn't get it going at Kansas. So why do we want Les Miles? I mean, Les Miles has if you want baggage, Les Miles has more baggage than Urban Meyer. And because he actually had some things happen at a school with some girls who went to that school. That's baggage, not something that happened in a bar away from work and the whole deal. That's not baggage. Baggage is when it happens on campus against the rules and you're doing some shit that you shouldn't be doing at work and it's a fireable offense and you're actually getting fired for it. That's what happened with Les. Can't bring that in. But let's say hypothetically he didn't have that baggage. Les Miles did not turn Kansas around the way Leipold did. So why not take Leipold? Leipold
100%.
worked magic. It's Leipold over Les Miles all day.
Right. And if you want to go back to LSU, like Les Miles won a championship, in 2003? No, 2008, 2007? It's 15 years ago. You can go talk about Coach O, who won one 4 years ago from LSU too. And he's not really an option either.
No Bill O'Brien.
Bill O'Brien's a no. Absolutely
I don't
not to
like Bill O'Brien. He was not that successful at Penn State, in my opinion. I know he had to come in after the whole Joe Pa thing, but I just remember him and Christian Hackenberg was not a combination that worked at all.
Christian Hackenberg was like a 5-star, unbelievable
right. He's supposed to be like a
quarterback.
future. He was so good that he was still like a second-round pick in the NFL after how bad he was at Penn State because he had that much potential.
Right. So he messed up the Christian Hackenberg deal. He hasn't had an elite offense at Alabama this year.
Right.
No,
There's nothing there from
He was
this is the
bad in
worst
Houston,
offense.
just actively bad, tanked the team.
This is the worst offense I've seen from Alabama in a while.
Yeah, it's not good. Okay, here's a
And
good
they
one.
have-
The sweater vest.
What's his name? Quarterback. Heisman Trophy
Who?
winner.
Bryce Young?
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
freaking
they're-
Bryce Young. How? Get out of here, Bill O'Brien. Just get.
Yeah, he's whatever. Okay, here's a good one. The sweater vest. So Jim Tressel has not coached, what, 10 years? Something like that? I don't even know
Yeah,
what
I think he
Tressel
was at Youngstown State a couple years ago.
was he? I thought that was Bo Pelini.
Bo Pelini was.
I believe Tressel was
Jim
also at
Tress-
Youngstown State.
Yes. I think you are
Okay,
both
I'll tell you
correct.
right now. Jim Tressel was not. Jim Tressel was a consultant for the Indianapolis Colts in 2011. And then it says he served as the vice president or the president at Youngstown State. So no coaching.
Okay.
So
Okay.
coaching ended after Ohio State. He had a pretty damn good record. Obviously, this probably isn't realistic. But yeah, I mean, Jim Tressel would be a good option. That's a guy you could afford to take a risk on. It's just tough. He's been out of the game for 10 years. When you're out for so long, are you going to
Yeah, I mean, if you're
bounce
going to go
back
after a
and fit
coach
in
who
right
hasn't
away?
coached in that long, you might as well go after Tom Osborne.
Right. That just doesn't make sense.
No, you would
Doesn't
go.
make sense.
You would go for old Feifel, Frank Solich.
Yeah, Frank Solich getting older though. Not an option. All these guys are getting older.
Jim Tressel's. Yeah, I mean,
Deion-
but I'm just saying, if you're going to go Jim Tressel age, aim for Frank Solich. That would make more
Yeah,
sense to me.
I agree. If you're already going up older, Dion says Connor for head coach. You know, I would never be a good head coach. However, I would be a really good hype man. I could get the guys really hyped up. I can get the juices flowing.
I could be a
For
get
sure
back
would be
guy.
Yeah, you could be a get back guy. Yeah, I would just be the
Just
guy
hold
on the
the coach's
sideline.
hips.
Getting people amped up. I would be really good at that part. But outside of that,
Wear sunglasses.
people say Will Compton. Will Compton would not be a good head coach. Will Compton's another hype guy. Me and Will could be on the sideline like cheerleaders, male cheerleaders on the sideline. Me and Will, we'd be really good at that. We'd be able to get the crowd amped up.
Speaking of cheerleaders, how about this mascot deal?
What mascot deal?
They're changing
They're
the
bringing
mascot.
Herbie the mascot back.
They're bringing an
Oh,
older
I
version
forgot.
of him that's been being modernized and bringing him back. And I actually have a hilarious story about that. After Scott Frost got fired, she was watching one of your reaction videos to it, Connor, and then she sends me this message, and she goes,
Who is this?
my mom. And she
Okay.
says, you know what the problem is? The mascot sucks. Mascot's not doing their job. I'm like, okay, whatever, Mom. Yeah, she goes, no, I'm not being dead serious. And then she comes, fast forward a couple weeks. Last week, she comes for my son's birthday and says, I'm serious about the mascot thing. They need to do something with the mascot, change the mascot. I'm like, okay. I'm just like, okay, yeah, I just want her to stop talking about it because it's cringe and weird to me. And then the next day, she heads home, and I read that they're updating the mascot. So,
Yeah, they're
Mom,
bringing
back
I
the
am
insider info.
sorry. I did not take you serious. You must have Trev Albert's ear.
She knew. It's the OG mascot's coming back, so maybe that'll help. I'm not sure. The Badger says he'll be the strength guy. He'll put him to work on the farm. Badger, that might be a good idea. And thank you for the 20. Thank you for the 20, Badger. I think we need to get some more offensive linemen out to the farm. Get out there to South Dakota to work with you. Get some bulls in the little ring with them, kind of like what we saw with Cam Jurgens. There was that one Twitter clip that went viral right after he got drafted by the Eagles, and it's him literally one-on-one trying to defend the bull. Yeah, if we could get some of that, Nebraska might be a.
We did
Might be
branding
a
for wrestling in
beast
high
on the
school a
offensive
couple
lineman.
times. They'd take us out.
Did you?
We'd go brand. Yeah.
You'd brand the cow?
Yeah, you'd have to wrestle the calf down, like physically
it.
wrestle him down and hold him down. You'd have to put your boot on their butthole so they didn't shit up you when they got branded.
I love it.
But wrestling. Yeah. Works.
So guys, I think we're gonna wrap this show up. We've been here for over an hour now. Jake, I appreciate you coming on. I'm still gonna have to
Happy
say
to
the
be
best
on.
pick for tomorrow is the over. I'm not gonna be able to ride with Nebraska -5.5. It's just too dangerous, too many points to give up. I do think Nebraska has a really good shot at pulling out the win, but yeah, it's
Can I
just
get
a
one A
risky
and B
pick
in?
right now?
This is what
Yeah,
I
of
wanted
course.
to
What's the A and
transition
B?
to from coaches. Who
Yep,
would
yep.
win in a fight? A, Tom Allen, or B, Bill Bush?
Hmm.
Tom
Tom
Allen.
Allen's
That's
got
a
a lot
tough
of
one.
feisty
Bill
anger
Bush.
They
in
have
him. When
very
he gets fired
similar
up, he can get real
personalities.
fired up and angry. I might have
This
to go
is
with
where
Tommy Allen.
I try to find people that I think could have a good fight, whether it be a tag team or what, every week. And I
So
think
B is B Bill Bush?
B is Bill Bush. I try to keep the B's together.
I would probably just because okay, Bill Bush seems more level-headed and sturdy, whereas Tom Allen just seems like a yappy dog who's gonna go crazy and yip. Yeah! Like that type of thing. So I'm gonna say Bill Bush can hold his own because Tom Allen's just too.
Whatever that politician that said "Pah!" back in the day.
Yeah, I'm all in on Bill Bush. Bill Bush for
I like
sure.
Bill Bush just because he's from Nebraska and not Indiana. That's the only reason.
Yeah, well,
if
I'm
being
trying not to be
realistic.
biased. I'm trying to give you a real reason. I think Bill Bush is just more based, more solid. Did my camera just cut out?
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
While we're
What
doing
happened to
that,
my
I
camera?
want to introduce a new segment, actually, one that I came up with. I think we have a lot of fun with this. I call it Rubbing the Genie Lamp. You get 3 wishes for this game. You can bring back any 3 players from Nebraska history, me, Indiana history. Any 3 players for this game. Who are they and why?
For this game specifically?
This game specifically.
Only 3?
Only 3. You get 3 wishes.
Okay, I'd bring back. This is really tough. First off, you got to have a really good corner. So, because I just don't know if we can trust that Nebraska's going to be able to get it done with Tommy Hill and Quentin Newsom. I think you bring in. No, actually, we leave those 2. We sub out the nickel and we bring in Eric Hagg from 2011. So we got Eric Hagg as a nickel. Then at linebacker, you bring in Levante David because Nebraska has really been struggling at linebacker. You'd sub out Nick Henrich for Levante David. Then at defensive tackle, I mean, the obvious answer would be Ndamukong Suh. You bring in those 3, and I think the defense takes a massive step forward just because now you have support on all 3 levels. That's where I'd go with that.
So you're bringing 3 defenders in A. I can't say I blame you with how the defense has played this year.
The offense
No offensive
isn't
line, though?
the offense isn't as broken. The offense is not as broken as the D, and because of that, we need to make sure we bolster the D as much as possible.
One of the Brown brothers from back, they weren't really brothers, but I can't remember either of their first names right now. But man, that huge boost to the secondary. Obviously, Levante David, and same thing, Sue. I mean, you bring people who can come in and shore up that defense. I mean, Alex Henry's on that list too because kicking has just it's been so
Yeah,
bad.
they don't have enough of a kicking game lately.
I mean, Alex Henry, you're in overtime against Georgia Southern. You may not lose that game,
It's very true.
right? I mean,
Yep.
Alex Henry may have saved Scott Frost's job. We may not have lost that many games last year. I mean, it's been
if he would have been
so
able to kick a
impactful.
57-yarder.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe you bring in a kicker. I just think that the defense is where you got to load it up. We've got Remington, Osborne, and Johnny Rogers. Tommy, Sue, and Levante. I'm not as concerned about the quarterback situation. I wouldn't say we need a quarterback right now. I'd say the key would be on the offensive line and on the defense. Everywhere else, I think Nebraska's got enough talent.
Love
I think people
Tommy
just want to see
Frazier
Tommy
to
play again.
death. Love Tommy Frazier to death. He doesn't work in today's college football.
He doesn't. And actually, he might. You never know because the way he ran the ball, the way he ran the option was different than what they do today. But if he was put into positions where he had to run a zone read, I'm sure he could do it from shotgun.
He could, but he's not a passing threat, so people are just going to load the box.
But what if you force
Defenses
him
are
to be more of
faster
a
now. He's
passer?
not going to get outside as quick.
Yeah,
It's
true.
just
It'd be-
the option has disappeared for a reason. That that spread triple op or not spread, that triple option, that power, it's disappeared for a reason. Defenses are too quick laterally.
Yep.
Of course, though, with what we've seen from Big Ten defenses this year, and not just Nebraska's extreme lack of tackling, they're not the only ones not tackling that well. There's other defenses that have had their struggles too. Maybe he does well because he could certainly run through the arm tackles that most quarterbacks can get taken down by.
Okay, we got a question now from LSU, Jake. Indiana, who are your 3 that you place? Who does Indiana have?
Rubbing the genie lamp, 3 guys coming back in IU history. Number 1 has to be Antoine Randall L. back at quarterback. Dual threat, way more accurate than Bazelak. Can shred people on the ground, super fast. No question about it. We're bringing it back for this Nebraska game. Number 2, sticking with that, exposing the run defense concept, Tevin Coleman back in. Beast of a running back, was incredible for Indiana. Him and Antoine Randall L. running that read option would be just a thing to behold. And number 3, I'm going with a guy who just left last year, Micah McFadden. He was the heart and the soul of our defense. And it would just, I know it's another linebacker, which is the strength of our defense, but getting him in there back next to Cam Jones with Dason McCullough, it just incredible defensive linebacking. And I think it'll be very difficult for Nebraska to run the ball in Indiana if that were the case.
That would be a better Indiana.
So those are my 3 choices.
Than we saw in 2019. Is it 2019?
Yeah, 2019 was the last time they played. Yeah, that would be an incredible Indiana team. That'd be a really tough one to stop. Fortunately, we just got to work with Bazelak and some broken down run game and broken down defense. So Nebraska still does have a chance. Here's Jim's wild prediction. Gabe runs for 100 and Chuba comes in and wins. Gabe could take off, but I think that Anthony Grant's got to be the one I expect to play. I mean, Anthony Grant's been the one who's doing the work so far this year. Gabe would have to break off some pretty big runs to get to 100 yards. But Gabe will play a lot this weekend, so he's finally getting a shot. Chuba
comes in if
does he come in?
If we're taking too many sacks, because oh my gosh, what is wrong with my brain right now?
You gotta be a quicker thinker. If the offensive line is breaking down, Chuba will come in because from what we've seen so far, Casey has not been able to make plays.
I was about to say, if Casey Thompson continues to stand there like he did in the Oklahoma game, he took some sacks he didn't really have to take. I'm not saying.
Yeah, I was very confused by that watching the Oklahoma game.
There was a couple where
he could have been avoiding pressure, scrambling out, throwing the ball away a lot more.
He just
not sure what he's doing on some of those.
So I mean, and that can come from taking shots, scrambling and getting hit from behind. I mean, you don't necessarily want to risk your future if your offensive line is not going to give you protection at all. Sometimes you just turtle up and take the hit and play for the next down or play for the rest of your career.
It's fair enough.
Chuba's got something to prove. He's got years in college ahead of him. If Casey's taking a lot of damage and he's not moving, I think you bring Chuba in. My opinion.
I wouldn't argue it. I think that's a good play. Another question that popped up, or a comment, was from High Mountain Guy. He said with AJ out, they're both going to have plenty of touches. Well, let's keep it real. Anthony Grant has touched the ball 3 times more than anybody else. So if Anthony Grant has 20 touches this week, or let's say 24, then Gabe is projected to have what, 8? I mean, how many times is Nebraska going to run the ball? 35 times? I think he's going to carry it 3 times as much as Gabe does. That's just my assumption. And Gabe wasn't as strong as A.J. Allen was. A.J. Allen was breaking off some serious runs. He's averaging 5.8 yards a carry. I just pulled it up here, so I know I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I remember watching Corn Crazed videos in the preseason. You're talking about Ramir Johnson, Jacuz Yant, Gabe Ervin, and none of these guys got any playing time really over A.J. Allen. So clearly the coaches thought Allen was better. His performance on the field, from what I've seen, has been pretty solid. So with him out and with Mickey kind of, not saying Nebraska's in must win, but, this is a big game for Nebraska for their season moving forward. So I expect Anthony Grant to get 90% of the touches at running back. I think they got to lean on him, especially in this game.
I agree. Wait, Scott, are you there? Scott, you there? Oh, I think he just dipped out of Discord. He tried to join the call-in show, but we missed him.
He's back.
He is back?
Yes.
Scott, you there? Scott?
Yeah.
Yo, what's happening?
Not much, man. How are you?
We're just here talking about some predictions for this weekend.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I like Nebraska winning, but I don't think they're going to cover. That's clear. We heard that earlier today.
5.5 is the spread. You think it's too many?
Too much.
If Nebraska wins, they're going to pull this out by a field goal or something tight. That's my guess as well.
I would agree with that. Maybe a little more, maybe a 4-point. I don't see him covering.
You think it's more likely that IU blows them out or that Nebraska wins, period? What's more likely?
I think Nebraska's going to win. I mean, a lot of it's obviously none of us have seen, since the bye week, what everything's looking like. So I think it's going to like, we're all kind of in the dark. So
you've got a lot of faith because most people I talk to are saying we don't have a chance to win a game right now against the Big Ten team because of what we've seen against Georgia Southern and Northwestern. Northwestern's the worst team in the Big Ten, by the way, in front of Nebraska. Nebraska is the worst team behind Northwestern. So you're giving them a lot of credit, a lot more than other people.
I think a lot's to be said about kind of the coaches, like the presser earlier in the week. Mickey talking about, the guys are flying around. They're playing fast. They're buying in. So the true tale of the tape on that one's going to be Saturday night when we see them flying around and prove to everyone that they are bought in.
Yep, I agree with that. Well, thank you for the insight. Thanks for being a member, Scott.
Hey, no problem, man. Connor, take care. Nick, thanks for being here, man.
Talk soon.
Later.
He meant
Thank you,
Jake.
Tim.
He didn't mean Nick. He meant Jake.
Thanks, Scott.
But all right, guys. Well, I think we've covered everything we can cover for this game. I know Thursday Night Football's on. I'm actually going to turn that on. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be back live. I'm going to be doing a prediction show if I have the energy, which I hope I do. I know today I had low energy. But I'm going to do prediction for the weekend's games. I'm going to do some picks. And I've had some people hit me up asking me about a bookie. They wanted to know how I make my bets because there's a lot of people who live in states where you can't make bets. So it looks like I'm about to do a deal with a new platform that allows you to make bets. And it's actually really cool. It's something I'm going to switch all my action over to. That's coming potentially tomorrow or next week. Once I have that, I'm going to invite every one of you to join onto there. You save money without having to pay the VIG. It's a very good opportunity, and it's something I'm very excited about. I would never take on a brand deal unless I thought it was something you guys could actually use or something I found value in. And this is something I think is pretty much game changer for me and for everybody else around me. So that's something to look forward to. But tomorrow, we'll say same time, 4:15 p.m. We'll do a live call-in show, or not live call-in show. We'll do a live show with me. If you guys want to do the call-in, we can do the call-in. But we'll be there making picks. And we'll get back to our regular content. This week was a slow week for me. But going forward, we're going to try and pump it out. Anyway, Jake, thank you for being here. Denon, thank you as well for helping out with the show. I know that last comment says Denon has upped the value of the show. Denon got me set up with a new mic, so the audio quality is going up. He's helped us produce this live stream for the past, I guess it's been 7 or 8 episodes, something like that. So we'll continue to make them better. What was that?
Since Buford.
Yep. So that was like 7 of them, 8 of them going on. Anyway, guys, thanks for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Go Big Red.